Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Hell House LLC Lineage. After a near-death experience, Vanessa Shepard faces nightmares in the Abaddon. As mysterious deaths occur around her, she discovers her connection to the Abaddon Hotel, Carmichael Manor, and decades of unexplained murders. Well, Luke, this is not the only, but certainly one of the first, I would say, of the big spooky haunted franchises that are coming to a close. We'll put air quotes on that because not only do we have this kind of underground, very, I guess you'd say deep rooted in the horror fan community series that's been going on now for 5 entries, which is kind of crazy. But we also have things like the whole Conjuring universe is supposedly hitting its final chapter this year as well. And I can't help but compare the two franchises because, they're both dealing with haunts and kind of very different ways. But also it's like the amount of sequels, the amount of like fans, the amount of people who've kind of rallied around both franchises. It's pretty impressive. And I gotta say, I'd say it's the edge goes to Hell House, not only for quality wise, in my opinion, but also just for the fact that they did so much with so very little. And that's kind of been their mantra this entire franchise. How do you feel?
I would second that as well. Hell House, as we're covering these are a lot of these. The first one I've seen, we're going through the Sunday Scares. If you're not keeping up with our live show on every Sunday, we're going through the Hell House franchise, and everything else has been a fresh watch for me other than that first one. So I'm kind of discovering these for the first time. I've been aware of the Hell House franchise, since its inception, and it's kind of equated to the VHS franchise, I think, where it's that underground horror. It's for a lot of deep-rooted horror fans. A lot of these are on Shudder is where you can find a lot of these, and that's where they have their life. And that's exciting to see these long-standing franchises. We talk about The Conjuring, and that one has been such a general audience kind of franchise out there that everyone was talking about when that first installment popped up, and then, of course, the sequel, and it's been just long-standing ever since then. But things like Hell House, VHS, I think those tug at your heartstrings because they do so much with so little. They are those shoestring budget kind of films, and they get to show the creativity. You go back to the original Hell House, such an iconic film in terms of the eeriness, the scares that they bring. It's a really a model, I think, for a lot of filmmakers that don't really have a big budget or are using the found footage style, because when you look at that initial film that kicks off this franchise, that is how you do it.
Yeah, and I've always applauded that movie for, again, less is more kind of usage. They really go for, just leaning on the subtle creeps of people who are making a haunted house in a real haunted house. So it's like, it's cool, it's simple. Now, as we've gone through this series, we've criticized a little bit of how the franchise, the narrative, I should say, has decided to go a lot bigger in a lot of angles. They've really leaned on the whole heaven and hell aspect of things and bringing literal angels into the story. And I think that's where I can safely say, especially as we've gone through the series here, that's where it starts to lose us a little bit. But I was very happy to kind of fall back on Carmichael Manor, where I felt like for the most part we stayed a little closer to what the first film was. I was certainly really energized by that one. And then we get word that Lineage is coming out. We're all expecting another one. These movies all have their fans and they do really well. But then we hear this is the final film. And not only that, it's taken a huge swing by not presenting this in found footage. No, they're going to be shooting this like a normal movie, just a narrative storytelling. And I was really curious to see how that was going to play out, especially for your final chapter. And I got to say, I think that for the most part, it's fine. It works. I just don't necessarily know why they chose to do it this way when it really seemed like it didn't change that much that you could have done from, a found footage perspective, I should say, if I'm making any sense there.
Yeah, when you get into the actual story of Lineage, I think a case can be made that, hey, you could have left this in that found footage style that we're used to with the Hell House franchise. And I know there was an article that had come out that Stephen Cognetti had said some of the things that he wanted to do didn't necessarily fit with the found footage aspect in terms of scares and kind of building that tension. But Lineage, I will say, going into this one, having more of a cinematic feel to it, a lot of great shots, a
Hmm.
lot of great kind of scene composition as well. But even when you look at it, I think a case can be made that this could have been found footage. But I think, Stephen Cognetti's kind of flexing, his muscles more so behind the camera and what he can do. When we get into this actual film itself, I'll say there's like an opening to this that I was enamored with. I don't know how you
Hmm.
felt about it,
Oh, I
Dylan, but
loved it. I loved it.
I I think the visuals there are absolutely stunning. It's very bright, the eeriness, and I think this one did get me excited for what was going to be the rest of the fallout for the film. Because when we're at this location at the very beginning and we see a familiar face from all these other uh, Hell House franchises or installments, and it got me excited because I think as we get into this, it's like the cold open of the film. I think it's so well done. It composed beautifully. It built a lot of great tension. And when we leaving that scene and when we see Hell House LLC Lineage pop up, and I was like, okay, he's got me hooked here. Stephen Cognetti, from that little blurb that I heard saying, I couldn't have portrayed some of the scenes that I wanted to in found footage. I see what you're talking about. So then the rest of the film, it had the job. Make the case for me. You built a great scene, and then so I had that in my head throughout. I was like, okay, is he going to be able to sustain this dynamic of Lineage and being that more of a cinematic nature?
Yeah, and I'd say probably about 50-50 on that overall. I think there are some shots, especially once you get to like the third act in this, where you have two characters, especially who are, I guess I won't spoil where they're at or what's going on, but they're in a place and there are some haunted elements to it. I think they're a little less. It's I guess the best thing that I could say about those scenes is it's interesting to see again from a more narrative perspective rather than a found footage perspective of what this looks like. But also I kind of feel like it also creates a lot of emptiness, strangely enough. And I don't know if that's just because I'm so used to this being a found footage franchise that like you don't normally have to worry when you're watching found footage about all the stuff around you and what to do with the space, as long as you're in the moment, you're behind the camera with the person. With this one, it just felt like there would be scary stuff going on, and I mean this through all the film, and it just feels like everything else is so empty. Everything else just feels so like we're not, none of the horrors any, like the best way I can describe is none of the tension is anywhere but this one singular point on screen, and it just always felt like if you did this in found footage it would be scarier. And I don't know, maybe it's also because again we have this clown figure that we've seen throughout all the other entries, and seeing him kind of not from the kind of like, ooh, he could be kind of turning his head in the shadows, he could be following you in the shadows kind of thing, and just seeing it outright, it's a little weird, it's a little different, it almost feels slasher movie-esque. And I, strangely being a huge fan of slashers, wasn't crazy about that.
And that was going to be kind of my next point here, where I didn't want to bury all my thoughts at the very beginning there, where trying to sustain that tension and make that case. I don't think Stephen Cognetti did it throughout the duration of the actual film itself, where I agree with you, Dylan, where if this was found footage and we build tension very differently in found footage versus, more of that cinematic narrative that we get in Lineage, I kept finding myself saying, "Ooh, if this was composed in a found footage aspect, it could have been a little bit scarier." And again, I applaud them for switching up how the story is going to be told, but I don't think we fully completed our mission in terms of building that tension in a unique way or making the case that this couldn't have been found footage. I think it's a beautiful film from what we did see. I think, I applaud Stephen Cognetti for going that approach with it and being able to actually show off his skills and what he can do. But it was a little hollow in a sense, where the scares, the tension, it felt like you bring up The Conjuring, some of the worst Conjuring stuff, the things I don't really like about some of the Conjuring films. It just felt very general audience. It felt like you lose that. Hell House is this little hidden gem with some, the horror fans. It just felt like it's falling in line with more general horror, and some things work in it, but a lot of things for me just lost their way in terms of what I'm looking for a Hell House franchise. And like you had talked about, seeing the clown And of course, we all know that clown is showing up in this, and it kind of borderlined the usage there of overuse for me, where I really like when he just shows up, he's in the background, his head's tilted, he moves, he just pops up in a spot, and those quick cuts there that create this jarring scare for us. But we see him a lot in this, and it just, there was a time in here, I don't know if it was about 30 minutes, 35 minutes in, and I was like, we've already seen this clown so many different times, and it doesn't stop throughout the duration. And the mystique, the scariness of that clown, just by the end of it, it just isn't there anymore. It just was so overused in this as that device to create tension or to create a scare that didn't hit like we had seen in other previous Hell House films.
I had a twist in mind that I thought would have been really great for this movie. But again, I don't think it necessarily would have worked. It would have worked if you would have taken this and maybe had established more entries that were linear as opposed to found footage beforehand. But like, yeah, I just feel like we overuse him. And again, it makes him feel very different than he has in other movies. Like you said, the opening, he's fantastic. Everything there is great. But then as we go along and we start seeing him literally chasing people, I will say it feels weird. It feels out of place. It suddenly makes what I love to compliment about my favorite scene from Hell House, where, you know, it's our main guy's like on the steps and he sees the mask, he sees the clown, and then he turns around and thinks the guy who was behind the mask is actually in front of him. I always think back about how you don't see anything in the mask. It's all those black eyes like Michael Myers. And it's like, I love that because that's the scariest part of any of that. But with this, suddenly it's like, okay, yeah, I can't see behind the eyes, but like I clearly see a person there. Like it doesn't feel scary or creepy or, you know, like this thing has the upper hand in a sense. You know, I don't like the idea of this ghost who's scaring people having to chase them down, I guess, is a weird criticism. But when you watch the movie, I feel like I'm not going to be the only one who feels that way.
Yeah, it just felt a little bit out of place, especially with what we've seen in the past 4 installments of the franchise. It felt like, you know, going into the more cinematic narrative, a bit of a gamble if this is the actual closure of the franchise, just to kind of have such a different take on it. I would have loved that if they would have mixed this up throughout each installment and, you know, varied between cinematic narrative versus found footage, if that was the route you wanted to go. Whereas this one, it just felt like maybe more of a hybrid approach. Like if we get to the third act and it somehow finds its way into a found footage, you know, to kind of warm our hearts in terms of everyone that's been with the franchise for so long, it just felt a little bit out of place. And this is a continuation from everything that we've seen. Obviously, as if this is a wrap up, we do, you know, see a lot of different stories going on. And one of my critiques as we've went throughout the franchise here is that it just gets super narrative heavy in bringing in the Abaddon story, Carmichael Manor, and trying to create so much connective tissue. It seems like we lose a lot of what made that first film so great, with building some tension, a lot of the eeriness, and some of the unexplained things that go on, where as we got deeper into the series, it's like, oh no, this means that, this means this is a familiar face here, and it continues here throughout Lineage. I found myself saying, maybe this is a little bit too much connective tissue with our storytelling. And, you know, it's not horrible, it's not abrasive, but I just wanted them to bring a lot of tension, a lot of eeriness, especially as the closure here. It just felt like we were getting a lot thrown at us in this. What is this? It's hour 45. I
Hour
think
40.
Yeah, it's a bit longer than, just a little bit longer than some of the other ones. But I don't know. It felt like I started really feeling that pacing, especially when we're getting a lot of connective tissue and I'm not getting as much tension as I would have liked, because it's like, oh, now I have to remember this. I have to remember this as well. And this is how it's all going to wrap up toward we get to that third act. So I found it maybe in a little bit of its own head at times of trying to fit in so much throughout the duration of this. And it kind of really slowed that pacing down for me.
Yeah, and I think, like, for my final thoughts here on Hell House LLC, the Lineage, this is certainly a movie that I think if you are a fan of this franchise, if you have been on board for this whole thing and you've done the ride, yes, go see this, go support it. The guys, they've earned it by this point. I think that this is going to, just like the rest of this franchise, work for some people and not work for others. Unfortunately for us, we are just very, very attached to that very first film and kind of how it presents its narrative and how it presents its scares. We're very simple people, I guess you could say. Where I know some people love how like deep this story goes and all the directions it takes with, heaven, hell, all this stuff. I think that it loses me there, and I was looking for something because like Carmichael Manor, I think the last one did a really good job of at least presenting it as a new story, as a fresh story, as something there, and then kind of slowly trickling things in, and bringing us back to the Abaddon of some sort. And I liked that. I thought that worked really well there. But here, again, I think you're taking a really big swing really late in the franchise that was exciting and definitely has us, excited to see what Stephen Cognetti does next. But I think overall, it does, again, a swing that I think some people will love. And unfortunately for us, I didn't necessarily, hit all the points for me that I was hoping for. But nonetheless, I still think this is a very worthy franchise, all in all, especially if this is how we're going to leave it. I think that, this is something that I would certainly love to own and support. And I would even go back and probably watch elements of this. Like I said, like Luke and I both agreed, the first like 15 minutes of this movie, or maybe 10 minutes, really strong, really good shit. There's one sequence in here I cannot wait to dive into once spoilers are allowed to happen. But like, it is one of those scenes where I was just like, this is so good. I love everything you're doing here. And then, yeah, it just kind of feels like they don't sustain that throughout. And it's a shame. But for me, I think I'm going to sit here at Hell House Lineage. I'm going to give this bad boy a worth a watch. It doesn't quite get to a recommend for me, but I think like just like the rest of these, the sequels, they're all pretty much on that worth a watch scale. The only one that I would actually say is a must see for me is the very first one. And that's just, again, because that movie actually terrifies me as to where when you add so much to the pie, you add so many ingredients to the meal, it just gets overwhelming.
Exactly. I think it's maybe over flavored in a sense with a lot of the elements that were presented. But that first 10 minutes, like you said, are really strong. That cold open, I absolutely adore. It's something I would love to go back and check out again, just because it caught me by surprise what we were getting there. So I was taking it in there, but I really just want to really pay attention to that scene because I think the pacing's done well. The scene is so vibrant with the coloring there. And it creates some good tension. And I think it got me excited for what the rest of the film could be. Unfortunately, it doesn't sustain as much tension as I would like or build upon a lot of the eeriness that I think the original Hell House had. It's a continuation of a story that I feel like maybe is a little narrative heavy, and we don't necessarily need every sort of element thrown in here. Creates a little bit of a slowdown in the pacing. But I think, like Dylan said, if you're happy with some of these other installments, this one's going to probably fall right in line with your expectation. And I think you're going to find some enjoyment out of it. You do get some closure to some of the story here in Hell House, as this is a supposed end. I guess we'll see. Time will tell there. Stephen Cognetti was able to really flex his muscles in that cinematic narrative. On the scenes outside where Vanessa's walking on a street covered in leaves, it really has that fall feel to it. It has that great element that I think we long for in some of the Halloween franchise films and things like that. I think he had a great eye being able to build that as well. So I think I'm gonna sit here with worth a watch as well. There's some decent scares in here that'll catch you, but overall it wasn't able to sustain as much tension as I would have liked. But I think it's still an adequate installment in the Hell House franchise. There's certainly a few worse than this one. I think this one, for me, in terms of where this falls in the franchise, right in the middle, behind just a couple of the other ones. But Hell House, the original, remains top tier. I think a lot of fans will agree with us in that aspect as well. But I think Lineage, certainly worth a watch.
Yeah, and again, if you've taken this journey, I think that it's only natural that you show up for this one and see it, because again, I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with what they're doing. I just think that overall, it's kind of just, you got to be that kind of person who wants all the answers. You got to be who wants all the mystery taken out of it. And unfortunately, I think that was what kept the first film so exciting. and what made me love watching it. And what scared me was it was such a mystery. But again, it's never been like a perfect franchise for me. It's never been something that I could sit here and say, oh, it's untouchable or anything. But it's always been a franchise that I respect. I respect the team behind it. I think everybody, the fact that they went 5 films into this in the modern day is so rare when it comes to anything like this. It's usually these legacy slashers and things like that who get this many entries. So I got to give them some credit there. But yeah, I think overall, if you're a fan of the franchise, go support it. It is out in theaters today, so you can check this bad boy out. The screening should already be on their way. And then this should be popping up, I believe it said on Shudder on October 2nd. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. This will be hitting Shudder next month. So that way you guys can all take a look at, or 2 months from now, I should say. So that way everybody will be able to watch it right around the Halloween time. And hey, I don't think it's a bad idea if you are a fan of this to sit down and binge watch the whole franchise. I think the one thing I can give them is that they do really unnecessarily, in my opinion, but they do a really good job at making every single entry count. Every single piece gets tied up. So it's like, hey, there's really nothing left to think about after that, which I think is a shame. But at the end of the day, 2 different audiences, 2 different styles of horror. But again, I got to give respect where I can.
Certainly, I think it's a very thorough in terms of its narrative. Maybe that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you're looking for with this franchise. But I think this is going to be something, if you wait until this pops up streaming, it's going to be a great October watch. But I think this is a film that can kind of get you started in the Halloween spirit as we work toward October, if you're going to go see this in the theater. And again, cinematically, very nice film. So if you go see this in the theater, I don't think you're going to be disappointed, especially just to see that cold open. I think that one could be very nicely portrayed on screen. So I think, like I said, worth a watch. This one does fall in line with a lot of things, but I'm excited to see what Stephen Cognetti's going to do next, if this is in fact the last of the Hell House.
Only time will tell. So we shall see. But yeah, guys, it's going to wrap us up here for our review of Hell House LLC Lineage. Let us know down below if you're going to be checking this bad boy out, or if you just got back from the theater to see it. We're certainly excited to hear what the diehard Hell House fans have to say. I'm sure a lot of them are really going to be happy with this. And that's honestly all I want from this, because again, we've been very upfront about our kind of in and out love with this franchise. So the people who are diehards for it, this is your end game. I'm ready for you. Have fun. Enjoy it. Enjoy all of this, because yeah, there's been plenty that we've gotten to do that with ourselves. So that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.